Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today, as I said, we're going to be doing some Q&A. I actually did a bit of an assholey thing here, where instead of honouring the first people to ask questions, I instead went to the most recent in descending order. So all you latecomers, this week at least, you get your questions answered. If anybody would like to submit some for next week, just leave them in the comments. That's the primary place I look for them. And so yeah, this is purely going to be on Heart of Thorns stuff. Let's jump in. The first one's from Joseph Kenner, who says, do you think in Heart of Thorns they will have the option to resize the UI, especially the quest text in the upper right of the screen? By quest text, I guess you mean the dynamic event information, or the hearts information as it was in the other areas, though it doesn't look like there's going to be hearts in Heart of Thorns. I don't think so, but it's an interesting discussion to me as to how many feature pack style updates we're going to get with Heart of Thorns. Like, we have a pretty clear understanding, at least story-wise, of how they're now splitting expansions versus streaming updates versus the living world. You know, we have an expansion, which is a big core story, probably about taking down a dragon, and then we're going to have living world seasons, which bridge the gaps between those expansions. That's fine, but then where do feature packs sit now? I mean, feature packs, I think, are really cool and did substantially change the game, both of them that we had. The original plans were to have one roughly every 6 months or so. Our next one is due relatively soon. Are we going to see one before Heart of Thorns actually drops? Who knows? But then you kind of look at expansions and you look at the fact that when people hear expansion, they want big game-wide changes. They want stuff like what we speculate is changing with the Defiance system, for example. That change, that Defiance system alteration, is really a feature pack style thing, but I guess they're holding it off now for the X pack, right? We saw like Courtyard added to the game at some point. I don't think that was specifically in a feature pack, but when we're looking at Stronghold, we're kind of expecting, oh no, this is now we wait for the expansion too. It is weird. It's weird for us as the consumers. It's probably been weird for ArenaNet to decide for themselves too what they withhold for the X pack and like sort of flag as a feature of it rather than just something that will be streamed into the game. But this one specifically, the idea of resizing UI, all that kind of stuff, I don't think they're gonna do it. They are quite solid with their grip on the way people can deal with the Guild Wars 2 client. You know, they don't let people have add-ons. They have a very specific aesthetic for the game that they want to be displayed in all the community videos that come out. It's either you have the UI on or you have the UI off and you're sort of showing off the world. But they don't want people to have all kinds of different crazy effects and colorations and stuff like that. Different meters like you would see in other MMOs. They kind of want a very strong grip on the way that things look. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of people look at it as a step backwards. I certainly do. You guys might remember a year and a half ago now, I suppose, I actually did a piece on using the Oculus Rift with Guild Wars 1, which actually sort of ish works, but one of the only reasons it worked was because I could turn the UI off, or more importantly, shuffle the UI into very weird places so that while I was wearing the virtual reality device, I could actually still see my skills and important information. I don't think we're going to get that for Guild Wars 2 at all, but hey, it might be nice if we see that in Heart of Thorns. And as I say, I'm infinitely curious what other feature pack style updates are they going to be coming through with this update. I mean, just the Defiance is something so subtle, and we just sort of see evidence that it might be there, but no dev has mentioned anything about it yet. That makes me really confident there could be lots of other things like that. Next question is from Nekumaru, who says, hey WP, given what we now know about the Suvari and the golden, sometimes glowing structures we've seen in trailer videos, do you have any further thoughts or speculations about the vision the pale tree gave us? My answer to this is no. I actually kind of consider the vision done. I really think the way they set up, especially with the dialogue right at the end of Season 2, where they specifically had that dialogue, I think it was from Marjorie, where she says, oh, look, we're in a golden place. This must have been what the pale tree's vision was showing you. I think that's ArenaNet sort of saying, yes, this is what it was showing you. I mean, I know it's coming from Marjorie's mouth, and she's not necessarily omnipotent. She doesn't necessarily know. But I think because we saw a little bits of dialogue like this, actually, everything in that vision has been resolved. I think what they did was they said, okay, we're going to give people this vision, and then very quickly, actually, we're going to try and address each little core element of it. So, you know, there were a lot of little things that I was speculating on. Many of us were, you know, we were so hungry for info. But if you look at the large kind of set pieces, the Kraukatoriki crystals, they're talking about going to Glint's lair, meeting Glint's egg, the light, you know, we quite clearly see what is basically the egg there. We see the golden buildings. I think it's all been addressed, and I don't think it's actually worth speculating about too much more anymore. Falafel Blech says, Yo WP, I was thinking about the mastery system. Based on how few waypoints we've seen in the last 2 maps, do you think masteries will be a sort of replacement for waypoints? Like, to get somewhere you climb a few trees and glide your way there, or perhaps using some other mastery, building vine bridges for instance, like you were saying, as a means of transport rather than relying on just double-clicking a marker on the map. I think this would be a very cool idea and probably allows more exploration and more immersive world since you're forced to traverse the land. What's my take? My take, I mean, the way I leveled my ranger, some of you guys might not know, I did a couple of videos on it. I never covered the whole journey in the end through videos, but I got my ranger all the way through his personal story and from 1 to 80 without using a single waypoint. Like, I just didn't do it. I was also doing a bunch of other stuff, but if you think that this makes the game a lot more immersive, I would say you are absolutely right. It is an incredible experience, something I would thoroughly recommend to a lot of people to try out if you are sort of already enticed by the notion. But there are also, we have to accept, lots of people out there in the community who don't want that from Guild Wars 2. One of the things that they really like about the game is how freely you can just waypoint all over the place. There's a certain type of gamer who just wants a ton of convenience. They don't care about immersion at all. It's not on their radar. They don't care about anything remotely related to RP stuff or, you know, really absorbing the world. They just want to jump around and immerse themselves in the mechanics. And unfortunately, that is a big enough portion of our community, I would say, that ArenaNet would never take away waypoints entirely, and I think this could actually work to their detriment. I think if they had announced it like PAX and said, yeah, there's going to be no waypoints in the new maps, these massive new maps, there's going to be no waypoints, I actually think you'd have seen a lot of discussion, a lot of people who were a bit thorny about it, and that would have been a bit of a disaster, really. So I don't think this is going to happen. What I do believe is there will continue to be a lower density of waypoints. I think no matter which camp you're in that I just described, I think we can both accept that the game is a bit more fun with less waypoints, and you don't need as many as the base game did. Silver Waste and Dry Top actually have things sorted really nicely, in my opinion. And if we see roughly that density, that would be quite cool. The other thing to consider with waypoints, though, is the whole outposts thing, and we could be in a situation where there are almost no waypoints at all that can't be contested, and you sort of only get them by having these outposts up and running. There was a really interesting idea with Ore at launch that I think, there was even a very old quote from Colin, I think, basically saying, look, we had some cool ideas for Ore. Ore was kind of going to be like world versus world PvE style kind of thing. It was going to be lots of big pushes and stuff, and it never really got realized. They said maybe they wanted to go back to, I think we're long gone from that now. I think Ore's just got to kind of sort of remain the way it is forevermore, probably. But there is an interesting idea with Ore where you're kind of doing this big push from the Straits of Devastation in, right? And you could have had a situation where you couldn't even be in the Cursed Shore if Malkor's Leap hadn't had packed supply lines and stuff established that allow you to push in. You know, all of those waypoints could have been contested. The portal itself could have been blocked off. This would have been a very interesting idea that they never ended up doing, and I wonder now, when we're talking about waypoints and limiting where people can go and the new outpost system, whether we'll see some of this come into the big push from, you know, the gates of Maguma into the heart of Maguma itself to kill Morgemoth. I wonder. But yeah, I think we're just going to get a lower density. Waypoints removing entirely in favor of gliding around and stuff, you know, a la like WoW or many other MMOs. I don't think we're going to see it, I'm sorry. Zyko says, hey WP, while messing about in Lion's Arch, I started to remember the nice times when it wasn't destroyed. Then I realised it's pretty much like Guild Wars 1. Pre-searing Ascalon is all nice and shiny, and then it's totally destroyed. Prince Rurik then gathers the refugees to head to Lion's Arch for a new home. If this is following the same formula, do you think we'll be moving from Lion's Arch instead of rebuilding it to a new central hub, maybe even the Masat city? It was confirmed that Lion's Arch will be rebuilt. There's a bit of a thread about it on the forums. Thought I should mention it. It's because of the time of this, like, little dev comment saying, oh, Lion's Arch will be rebuilt. People might think, oh, this is going to happen with Heart of Thorns. I don't think necessarily it will happen with Hearts of Thorns. Nothing says it's coming anytime soon. But the place will be rebuilt. I'm still hoping that it will be rebuilt slowly. It's not going to be like one big update where it's like, oh, there you go, it's done. I'm still hoping that the next time we get choice for Living World on a big scale, just like who we voted for with Ellen and Evan, I would like us to have some say in how it's rebuilt. You know, which districts maybe get more money and end up more lush. That would be a really cool way for players to sort of be like, hey, I had a permanent impact on the game world here because I friggin' voted for this plaza to get all these fundings from Evan, and look at how lovely this is, while the old area we used to hang around with is now in squalor because I didn't like that place anyway. Like, that'd be really cool. So yeah, I'm hoping we get to see decision, but they did confirm it will be rebuilt, so it's not quite like they're paralleling pre-steering. HoW says, hey WP, do you think the Revenant will start in one of the newer areas from the biomes? Maybe there'll be a lower level area, or do you think they will all be level 80? I just hope the Revenant doesn't get the same odd story every other new character could get. Absolutely, the Revenant will get one of those old stories. I cannot imagine a world in which the Revenant gets its own, like, starting zone. It's not a race. The only thing in Guild Wars 2 that determines your starting zone and story and stuff is your race. Like, the profession doesn't actually do anything. And so, yeah, you'll pick, you know, Asura, and then you'll pick Revenant, and then, yeah, you're going to start off in Explosive Intellect, and then you're going to be in Metrica Province, and you're going to do all that stuff. Or if you pick a Char, then you're going to be out there in the plains of Ashford. I think it's really wishful thinking to think that they're going to get their own story and stuff. The reason why they didn't decide to make a new race and decide to go with a class instead is because adding a class is actually a lot easier for them to do. They don't have to do all this story stuff. They don't have to do this new area stuff. They don't have to add a new city necessarily. I'm not saying they have to with a new race, you know. You could bung it in somewhere else, but I doubt they'd do that. The reason they do it is because it's easier to make, maybe not to design, because there's a lot of complexities involved with creating a new profession, but once they've done that, it also changes the game as well in a big way. Once you add another profession to the pool, there's all these new comps that can start existing across all three game types, and just it snowballs through the game a lot more than just, oh yeah, except now some of our players look like birds, right? So that's why they did it, and I do not expect this is the least likely thing I think will happen. I think Revenant's just going to get the old stories, and yeah, you know, this kind of flavorful idea, oh, Ritlock is teaching everyone how to become Revenant. I don't really think matters. It doesn't matter if you're a Revenant Char and you're meeting Ritlock before he went into the mists and stuff. It's just going to be one of those fun little quirks, right? Yeah, and I also think pretty much every single area in Heart of Thorns is going to be level 80. I wouldn't expect any to be lower than level 80, because then you introduce downscaling and weird stuff when they're trying to emphasize this new endgame progression in the way of masteries. So keep the level flat from now on. Level doesn't matter anymore. It's all about masteries, and then you can kind of get rid of a weird variable there, you know? Veziop says, hey WP, my question is brief. Perhaps the Revenant has a one-handed sword as the only main weapon. What do you think of normally used one-handed could now actually have 5 skills for the Revenant only? I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think they're going to shake that up enough. I don't think they're going to let you equip what would usually just give you 3 skills and instead get 5, if that's what you're trying to say. I think from what people have seen or what I've heard, if you look very closely at Pop the Revenant, he looks like he has a dagger in his offhand. Now that's just big speculation there, but it looks like he could be sword, dagger wielding. Dagger was on my list of something I speculated that the Revenant would have, and I'd kind of expect the Revenant would have. So yeah, I don't think anything weird like this is going to be happening. He's got sword dagger out. Lulu Marusu said, in a recent interview, Colin said that now would be the perfect time to level Suvari characters level 80. Do you believe there'll be exclusive Suvari content in the future? I think this would be a cool opportunity for the story to branch out, give Suvari players the option to become corrupted, and play through a dark story path amongst the Mordrum and experiencing maddening visions from Mordremoth. Other races could be given a choice to join radical racist faction to pursue the extinction of the Suvari race, or alternatively go with a good neutral faction that seeks peace in a way to save the Suvari race from corruption. Eventually everyone would merge together for the good ending, but these choices would give players much more role-playing variety and identity to our characters. There's a lot I could say about this. To the last point where you say basically, oh, eventually the story could merge back together, I think that would be a huge mistake. I think if you're going to do something like this and try and give people big choice like this, the ends of the stories have to be different. Otherwise, it completely invalidates the choices you made before. You know why Guild Wars 2's personal story sucks? It's because at the start of the game, you have like millions of choices. If you imagine all the choices like laid out next to each other, left to right, you have this huge long list, right? But then as you progress forward up the story, they all like close together in this big pyramid, and then it all ends the exact same damn way, and it feels suddenly like when you're at the end of everything, oh, what was the point in all these stupid decisions I made before? I don't really care. That's like the worst way you can do story decisions in an RPG, and I don't think ArenaNet's gonna do this. This is like one of those really hopeful like comments I could see myself throwing out many years ago when I'd be nothing but optimistic and not really temper myself at all. Like, this is a cool idea. No one's gonna say this isn't a cool idea. It's just this isn't gonna get realized, is it? It's also perhaps a little against how ArenaNet want Guild Wars 2 to be. You know, they want us to always be seeing each other as friends and stuff like that. So I can't see them ever going to this effort. If something like this was even remotely gonna happen, I think it's big enough that they would have announced it at PAX South, no? But yeah, one thing though that is interesting is, yes, we do indeed have a dev quote that says, "Now's a great time to level a Suvari for the expansion." Why? Is it just because Heart of Thorns is so heavily tied to the Suvari? Big part of me just thinks it's going to be that, but maybe something more will occur. Maybe Suvari players that complete Heart of Thorns will get some tiny little cosmetic change on them. I'm not expecting anything major though. What could that be? They're certainly not going to give it anything super major to one race and not to the others. Maybe we'll just find that there's a lot of different dialogue and stuff if you're playing as a Suvari as opposed to the other races. The last question for today is from Richard Calver, who says, "Hey WP, do you think the way ArenaNet did not give us a date for the release of Heart of Thorns is bad for them as a company? In my experience with games, is the players want stuff to work towards and a date would have been good. With this, do you think the player base could drop?" No, I don't, not at all. The player base has increased massively since the announcement. You could say, okay, would it have increased even more if the announcement had come with a release date? Well, that entirely depends on when the release date was. If the release date, you know, was 9 months out, which I don't believe it will be, but if it was that far away, then people aren't going to be interested, are they? They'll be like, oh, I'll come back later, maybe. But leaving it open in the air, I'm actually fine with this. I think this is pretty much standard industry practice. A lot of the times with MMOs, you find an announcement comes, even for their expansions, an announcement comes of the release date, and it's really close to actual release. Like, I don't know, they'll announce like it exists quite quickly, but then it's like, oh yeah, release date is now, and then it sort of happens rather fast. I think it's fine the way that they did this, and yeah, maybe if Heart of Thorns really was only coming in 2 months, they should have announced it, but that's just not going to be the case, is it? I really have no problems with the fact there's no release date announced just yet. Let them do it after the beta testing, like they say. It's actually quite an honourable reason, in my opinion. But there you go, that's it, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Again, just as a reminder, if you would like a question to be in the next episode, leave it in the comments down below. I will always be reading them, and I guess I will see you next time for more Heart of Thorns stuff. Let me know what you thought about what I said today, and I'll see you tomorrow.